Chapter 10, Attack of the Monkey Boys. Shika-tick-tick, shika-tick-tick. I'd give anything for a chetty blade or a splat gun, but all I've got is my carry bag. Better than nothing, but just barely. It has a rope loop on it, so I can swing it when things come within range. Thing, because it doesn't sound human. Too delicate and steady to be the bangers. Too large and loud to be a rat. Unless it's a rat the size of a wild dog. Just thinking about that makes me shrink up inside myself. Ryder and me are both hugging the curved wall of the pipe in hopes that whatever it is will go right by us. Shika-tick, tick. No such luck. It's slowing down. I'm staring into the dark so hard it feels like my eyes are bugging out. Tick, tick. Closer and closer until it sounds like I could reach out and touch it, or it could reach out and touch me. The shadows move, and I see it has the shape of a hunched-up monster. It spots me or senses me or somehow, and veers in my direction. Tick, tick. Must be talons dragging, claws as sharp as needles. Icy water floods through my guts. My heart slams. I've forgotten how to breathe. The thing is reaching out for me. I rear back with the carry bag and start to swing with all my strength. Chalks, the monster says. Just what we need tagging along. A 5-year-old kid who only knows one word. What happened is Littleface found himself a walking stick like Ryder's and dragged it along. Shika-tick-tick. We're stuck with him because there isn't time to take him back or anybody there to keep him even if we did. It seems like no matter what I do, the kid keeps finding me in the dark. I figure it's the gummy's fault somehow. If you hadn't come along, the little brat would still be there, I tell him. You're the one who fed him, Ryder says. The poor child has been hungry all his life, so it's no wonder he's fastened on you, Mr. Chalksbar. The gummy speaks true, but that doesn't make me any less angry. Why should I care what happens to the little brat if nobody else does? Don't be discouraged, Ryder says. The child can look out for himself. That's how he survives. Running a latch is hard enough alone, I remind him. With 3, it's impossible. Oh, says Ryder, raising his feathery white eyebrows. So you're an experienced latch runner, are you? The way he looks at me makes me want to tell the truth. I've never left the latch, I admit, not since they brought me here. Then perhaps you'll take my word for it. What we're attempting to do is far from impossible. Dangerous, yes, but hardly impossible. After all, a runner crossed 3 latches to get the message to you, didn't he? If he can do it, so can we. And with 3 of us, we're less likely to be mistaken for professional runners or smugglers. What he says makes sense, although I hate to admit it. I'm out of chalks bars, but I give Littleface a chunk of Proov edibles and he gobbles it down like he's starving, flashing a smile that eats up his whole face. We wait until the sky is all the way light and then check out the end of the pipe. There's no stairway, but Ryder figures we can skinny down the pylon somehow. We haven't much choice, he says. We'll have to risk it. As it turns out, Littleface shows us the way. He slips over the edge and then crawls down using the rusty steel bars that stick out of the concrete. About 10 seconds later, he's standing on the ground below shouting, "Chalks! Chalks!" which I guess is his name for me, or maybe just a way of saying, "I did it." Ryder's saggy old face is pale and worried, but I know better than to say anything. He goes next, and it takes him a lot longer than Littleface, but he manages to get down without breaking any bones. Now they're both looking up at me. "Come on," Ryder calls out. "You can do it." I think about Bean, how she's waiting for me, and how it doesn't matter if I'm scared of heights. About halfway down, my feet slip, and I have to hug the concrete to keep from falling. Don't move, I'm thinking. If you move, you fall. "You're almost there," Ryder says right below me. "Reach down with your right foot." I do what he says, and he keeps telling me where to put my feet, and after about 1,000 years, I make it all the way to the ground and stand there shaking. What if the spaz had hit me? I say, more to myself than anybody else. It didn't, Ryder says, and we don't have time to worry about things that didn't happen. We better get a move on. It's a 2-hour hike to the next section of the pipe, assuming it's still there. "What?" I say with a gasp. "You don't know?" "The last time I came this way was many years ago," he admits. "Things change. You never know a thing for certain until you've seen it with your own eyes." What I do see is pretty amazing. In this latch, the old scrapers come all the way to the edge. They say in the back times the scrapers were made of glass, giant glass buildings 100 stories high, maybe more. They say people went inside the glass buildings, traveling up and down in electric boxes, and that toward the end the people never came out or walked on the ground, but lived and died inside. The scrapers are just twisted steel skeletons now, enormous, eerie-looking things that disappear somewhere up in the smog. Tons and tons of crumbled concrete surround the base of each scraper, stuff that must have fallen when the big shake rocked the world and split open the earth and dried up the rivers and stuff. When the light hits the wreckage, it glitters like diamonds, but Ryder said that's only chunks of broken glass, and that many a man has died looking for treasure that doesn't exist. The only real treasure is inside your head, he says, tapping the side of his skull. Memories are better than diamonds, and nobody can steal them from you. Staring up at the scrapers makes me feel extra small. Why did they build them so high? I ask him. Because they could, I guess. But weren't they afraid of earthquakes? Not afraid enough, he says. I don't suppose anybody really knows how bad a thing can be until it actually happens. The sun is barely visible through the smog, but Ryder says if we keep it over our left shoulder and walk straight ahead, we'll get where we're going, no problem. We trudge along for a couple of hours, and all that time we don't see another living thing. No weeds, no insects, nothing. Just ruins melting into dead sand. Not even the rats are dumb enough to live this close to the edge, which is fine with me. We seem to be alone, but I keep getting this creepy feeling that something is watching us. Maybe the scrapers themselves. I don't know if the old buildings can see or not, but they sure can moan when the wind goes through the steel, moaning like they know they're slowly dying and can't do anything about it. As it turns out, the pipe is right where Ryder thought it was, sitting up there on its crumbling pylons, ready to take us where we're going. We're almost there when the howling starts. Ah-yee-hoo-hoo, ah-hoo, yip, yip. It sounds like wild animals, but somehow I know it isn't. Not exactly. Littleface hugs my leg. I can feel him shivering, which scares me almost as much as the howling. Ah-yee-hoo-hoo, ah-yee, yip, yip. They come pouring out of the ruins, howling and scampering and waving their arms. Monkey boys, said Ryder. Don't move. They swarm in, surrounding us, and I can see their faces painted to look like monkeys, and their wild eyes that want to kill us. Chapter 11. Mongo the Magnificent. Monkey boys. I've heard of them. Monkey boys control this latch like the bully bangers control theirs. But the creatures pouring out of the ruins no longer act human. They've become as wild as the paint on their faces. And it isn't only the face paint. Their teeth have been sharpened into fangs, and their fingernails are like yellowed, curving claws. Something's wrong, Ryder hisses to me. No kidding, I hiss right back at him. As the crazy clawed hands reach out to grab us, Ryder twists around and looks me in the eye. Do not resist, he warns. They'll tear us limb from limb. I figure that may happen anyway, but fighting won't do any good. There's way too many of them, and not enough of us. I try to keep hold of Littleface, but as the swarm lifts us, he gets separated. The little guy yells, Chalks, Chalks! And it means help me, but I can't help him or Ryder or myself because we're being carried away by 100 howling madmen with ferocious snapping fangs. I'm thinking the bangers never act like this, not even when they're canceling a victim. But the monkey boys don't seem to have a leader making rules and telling them what to do. The old gummy's right. Something is wrong. The monkey boys don't just look like animals and act like animals. They've become animals. The screaming swarm carries us back into the ruins under the long steel shadows of the giant scrapers to a place where the air smells of blood and rust. They bring us to a strange dark structure, a fortress made from the iron bones of a fallen building. Great iron beams hammered into the ground and bound together with woven steel cable. Splat guns and cannons stick from slots in the walls. The swarm of wild monkey boys surrounds the fort, leaping and howling. Ah-hee-hoo-hoo, ah-yip-yip. The howling becomes a word. Mongo, they howl. Mongo, Mongo, Mongo. They keep screaming for Mongo until a section of the great iron wall is lowered by cable, and we are carried into the fort. The entire swarm tries to get inside, but a squad of techs is guarding the fort, and the techs hold their ground, chopping at the mob with chetty blades and stun sticks, driving them back. The monkey boys drop us to the dirt and back away. The great doors raised behind us, shutting out the swarm, and for the first time since we've been seized, the howling stops. For some reason, the quiet is even more terrifying. The techs point their weapons at us and indicate that we get up. Ryder can barely stand, but he waves me off when I try to help him. Show neither aggression nor fear, he whispers to me urgently. Just play along. Play along? I've no idea what the old man is talking about. How do you play along with a dozen armored thugs who communicate by grunts? The best I can do is keep Littleface close by as the techs herd us deeper into the fortress. The smell is terrible and gets worse. No plumbing, obviously. Very little power because the lights keep flickering. Whoever's in charge of this place, he's not paying attention, that's for sure. We pass a stockade crammed with prisoners who stare at us with dead eyes. They're all bone-thin, wearing tattered rags. They don't even have the strength to moan or beg or help or keep themselves clean. A good sign, Ryder says out of the side of his mouth. A good sign? The old gummy must be losing it. But then I realize what he's getting at. If they keep prisoners, that means their victims aren't canceled immediately, which means we might have a chance to survive, at least for a while. The techs shove us down dark, winding passageways, and we make so many turns there's no way I could find my way back, even if we did manage to escape. As it turns out, we hear Mongo before we see him. A loud voice booms through the passageway. Hear Mongo and obey! Hear Mongo and obey! Over and over, like an old 3D stuck on replay. Which, as it turns out, is pretty close to the truth. When we get closer to the booming voice, lights begin to glow, reflecting off the walls. When the last we turn the corner, there he is. To your knees, a tech boss shouts, shoving us down with his stun stick. Pay homage to Mongo the Magnificent. Hear him and obey. We drop to our knees and look up at Mongo. He's a fierce, powerful-looking latch boss with bright, blazing eyes, huge, muscular arms, shoulder-length hair the color of midnight, and a snarling, blood-red monkey tattooed on his enormous chest. He thumps the tattoo with his fists and goes, Hear Mongo and obey! Hear Mongo and obey! It's crazy, but I almost laugh out loud. Mongo the Magnificent is nothing more than a hologram, a short loop from a 3D, repeating over and over again. It wouldn't fool a 2-year-old kid, and it doesn't fool me. Ryder murmurs, I'm going to try something. Whatever you do, don't interfere. Before I can stop him, the old gummy stands up slowly, leaning on his stick. On your knees, the tech boss commands. Homage to Mongo. All the weapons aim at Ryder. It's hard to tell with the masks they wear, but the techs look nervous, uncertain. You must take us to the real Mongo, Ryder tells them, raising his voice to be heard over the sound of the repeating hologram. Knees, cries the tech boss. Homage! But he sounds uncertain. Does Mongo live? Ryder demands. Mongo lives, says the tech boss. He sounds puzzled, as if he's not quite sure why he's talking to the old gummy instead of canceling him. Ryder walks up to the tech boss. I'm sure he's about to die, but the tech boss doesn't move. Take off the mask, Ryder suggests. Let me see your face. Much to my amazement, the tech boss takes off his armored security mask. Under the mask, he's just another young guy with a round face and worried eyes, and he's looking at Ryder like he can't decide. Should he listen to the old man or cut his red? You must take us to Mongo, Ryder tells him. Maybe we can help. The tech boss hesitates, and his face gets all wrenched up like he's in pain. I don't have the authority. Does anyone have the authority? Ryder gently asks. No, I thought not. Think about it, son. What would Mongo want you to do? Hear him and obey, the tech boss responds instantly. Yes, of course, Ryder says patiently, and you've done a splendid job of obeying him under very difficult circumstances, keeping your squad together, defending the fort, and so on. But now you must do more. You must help Mongo. Take us to him. I'm afraid, the tech boss stammers. We're all afraid, Ryder says soothingly. If the situation continues, the fort will be overwhelmed, and you'll all be destroyed. I think you know that. Something must be done. The tech boss speaks uneasily, as if afraid of being overheard. What you say is true, but what would you have us do? Let's start with trying to help Mongo, shall we? Ryder suggests. The poor tech boss looks like he's being tortured, but finally he nods and goes, Follow me, but if we all die, don't say I didn't warn you. Warning acknowledged, Ryder says. Now proceed. It's one of the most amazing things I've ever witnessed. An old gummy, an intruder into the latch, persuading a tech boss to disobey his orders. When I look at Ryder, it's like he knows what I'm thinking because he gives me a wink and makes it clear that we just go along while we've got the chance. Hawks? Littleface asks, tugging at my leg. Shh, I tell him, we'll be okay. And for the first time since the monkey boys grabbed us, I really do think we might make it out alive. Of course, I'm assuming Ryder intends to overpower the young tech once we get the chance, and then shoot our way out of the fortress. As it turns out, he's got an entirely different plan. The crazy old fool really does want to see Mongo, the real one, not the hologram version. We follow the frightened tech boss into a much smaller passageway, barely room to move, really, and then up a set of metal ladder steps. At the top of the stairs, the tech boss glances furtively around, takes a deep breath, and then wrenches open the lock on an overhead hatch. He gives Ryder a mournful look, then cautiously pushes open the hatch. Inside, he whispers. Without hesitation, Ryder climbs up the last few rungs of the ladder and disappears through the hatch. What choice do I have? I follow him inside into the secret lair of Mongo the Magnificent, boss man of the Monkey Boys. Chapter 12. The problem with looping. The first thing I notice is the horrible stink. Think of moldy dead rats and rotten eggs and dirty diapers. This is much, much worse. After crawling up through the hatch, I roll to one side and wait for my eyes to adjust to the glittery dimness. Except for the stink, it reminds me of Billy Bismo's place, only bigger. A latch boss pleasure crib stuffed with goodies and gizmos and every possible gaming device. There are lots of soft inflatos that mold themselves to your shape when you sit down, and thick massager rugs that rub your feet while you walk, and all kinds of beautiful polished things. A lot of it isn't quite real. The glowing fish that swim in the holoquarium, the 3Ds of female dancers that float up above a projection table, wriggling their arms and legs and dancing to music I can't hear. The stink is real, though. Real enough to make your eyes water. Try not to breathe through your nose, Ryder advises. I can tell from his expression that he's not terribly surprised by what he sees or smells. I follow him to the center of the room, where we find a huge round bed that seems to be the source of the horrible stink. Imagine a throne made of thick sleeping mats, and you got the idea. The poor wretch, Ryder says softly. Lying on the bed throne is a shriveled, starving creature soaked in his own filth. Most of his hair has fallen out and lies in a fuzzy pile around his head. His teeth are gone, and his eyes are milky blind. I can barely make out the faded red monkey tattoo on his withered chest. At first glance you might think he's dead, but he isn't, not quite. His fingers twitch a little, and his mouth works, as if he's trying to speak, and you can see where the veins pulse weakly in his scrawny neck. A faint sound comes from his ruined mouth. Like the noise of a small motor running out of power. Amber lights slowly blink on the silver boxes of the mind probe machinery going bzz, bzz, bzz. I get the idea the thing in the bed is trying to talk to the probe machine, or think the probe is talking to him, something like that. The weird thing is, the filthy, bone-starved creature seems to be smiling, as if unaware of his condition. What happened to him? I ask. The young tech boss has worked up the courage to follow us into the room. Mongo has been looping for more than a year, he says. Looping? Ryder asks. A probe that keeps repeating in endless variations, the tech boss explains. You never have to come out if you don't want. This one is called Forever Eden, and it's his favorite trendy. Mongo is in Eden now, living the life of a Proov. He refuses to leave. He loves it there. A thick, grayish liquid oozes from around the needle stuck in the center of Mongo's naked skull. They call it brain ooze, and it happens when you probe for too long. They say that some of the more expensive probes last for 24 hours, but I never heard of anybody staying under for a whole year. So he's living in another world, Ryder says, or he thinks he is. Exactly, the tech boss says. Can we shut off the machine? If we shut it off, he dies. It's the only thing keeping him alive. The brain stimulation keeps his heart beating. I see, Ryder says. And the reason nobody takes care of him or keeps him clean is because they're all terrified of Mongo the Magnificent? Oh yes, the tech boss says. There was a time when to enter this room without permission meant instant cancellation. Mongo killed many, often for no reason. To look directly into his eyes was a death sentence. Ryder studies the tech boss. Look around, he suggests. Are you still frightened of Mongo? The tech boss slowly shakes his head. Somebody has to take charge of the latch, Ryder tells him gently. Why not you? Me? The tech boss says, sounding terrified. You had courage enough to bring us here, Ryder says. If someone doesn't take over, and soon, then all will be lost. Without guidance, without a leader to lead them, the monkey boys have degenerated. They'll tear you and your men apart and then destroy themselves. But why would they listen to me? I'm not a latch boss. Neither was Mongo, Ryder points out, until he made himself one. After we leave, the young tech boss seals the hatch, but the stink of what happened to Mongo sticks with me. I'm thinking it could happen to Billy Bismo, too, if he isn't careful. Part of me wants Billy to end up that way, for being so cruel about Bean, and the other part of me knows that as bad as the Bangers are, they'd be that much worse without someone to make the rules. What's your name, may I ask? Ryder says to the tech boss. Gorm. That'll work, Ryder says, musing to himself. The Great Gorm. Why not? Meanwhile, the Great Gorm looks like he's going to be sick. The color is drained from his cheeks. He's breathing sort of puffy, and his eyes have this faraway focus, as if he's looking at tomorrow and doesn't much like what he sees. What if I fail? He asks. You must banish all doubt, Ryder instructs him. The other thing you must do is make up a few simple rules. That's what the monkey boys expect from their leader, a few rules strictly enforced. Gorm thinks it over. You can tell he's slowly getting used to the idea of taking over from Mongo, and the more he thinks about it, the more he likes it. If I'm the boss, they'll have to obey me. He mutters to himself, obey or die. That's the first rule. Ryder nods, as if that's what he expected to hear. I have a request for the Great Gorm, he says, bowing his head. What? Says Gorm, lost in his thoughts. Oh, yeah, sure, go ahead. 2 requests, actually. The first is that you release all prisoners as a gesture of goodwill, Ryder suggests. My second request is that you banish us from the latch. Have a squad of techs escort us to the border. Gorm looks at him sharply. What? I assumed you'd stay and be my advisor. We have a mission elsewhere, Ryder says, making it sound grand and important. But I do have one more piece of advice. Do not appoint an advisor until you're certain of your men. If I'm not mistaken, Mongo was advisor to the previous latch boss, the very one he assassinated. Gorm glances nervously behind him, then catches himself. I notice he's already looking bigger and stronger. Mongo made his proclamations from the East Tower, he says, eyes suddenly flashing. The Great Gorm will do the same. I must tell them there's a new boss, new rules. Ryder studies him thoughtfully and then nods. The king is dead, he says. Long live the king.